The Mountaintop Podcast show notes can be found at www.mountaintoppodcast.com, where you can also subscribe to the newsletter and get a 25-minute call with me for free. Also, you're invited to join the Mountaintop Summit Facebook group. Look forward to seeing you there.
Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
Greetings and welcome to another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Scott McKay, Instagram now at Real Scott McKay, and also on YouTube, Scott McKay. And with me today is a new friend of mine. She's very sweet. You guys are going to like her. She's got a very interesting job, which made her the perfect person to have on this show. She is a vocal essence expert. Her name is Krystin Wahl, and she comes from northern Arizona, beautiful part of the world. Krystin, welcome.
Why, thank you, Scott. I'm actually super excited to be on here. And I love what you're doing here.
Well, I'm glad you're excited to be here, and you're certainly welcome. And you should be excited to be here because these guys are going to love you, because what you do is so important to us getting better at attracting women that I can't believe we've never had a show on this before. But I'll tell you, like has happened before, Krystin, we just needed the right expert to come along. And I quite literally stumbled across you and what you do. And I was intrigued enough that I signed up for one of your free exploratory coaching sessions. You do these brief assessments of guys' vocal tonality, how they're talking, how they're using their voice. And you added so much more depth of value to that than I was expecting, that I finally just invited you on the show because you're such a badass at this. And some of these guys are probably out there thinking, well, McKay, you've got this media trained voice. Don't kid yourself. Krystin here found stuff that I never even thought about to have me work on and hopefully be an even better podcasting voice for you guys. And what I wanted you to come talk to these guys about, and you agreed to it, said you'd be able to do it, is how to use our voices to attract women better. And I think the realization of that topic and having you on our show came about when you agreed that, yeah, women are often very attracted to a man by the sound of his voice. Tell me more about that, Krystin. Tell me that from your own perspective.
Oh, absolutely. This is one of my favorite topics because it's something that we don't realize is introducing us and is really captivating who we're speaking to. So it's been said that within the first 7 seconds of speaking, others have already made basically value judgments on how we sound. And the reason why is because our voice is an instrument. And if we think about it as an instrument, we wouldn't just randomly pick up a tuba without ever playing it before. We wouldn't pick up a guitar and go out and start strumming or playing those instruments without practicing it before and expect people to really enjoy the sounds that are coming out, or expect to, get that date or get that raise, those types of things. So it's really interesting to realize that our voice is an instrument, a dual instrument. It's a wind instrument and a stringed instrument. And we've never practiced it before. Most of the population has never practiced their voice before.
Oh, come on. It can be a percussion instrument, too. Haven't you ever heard the Fat Boys before? Do a little beatboxing?
Oh, yes. Exactly.
Well, I tell you what, you're a very brave woman to basically invite my entire audience of tens of thousands of guys to silently judge you because of your voice while you're talking. And they probably did that for a good, minute, since you talked for about 1 minute and 7 seconds there. But seriously, though, I think you're onto something. Years ago, back when we had to record our own messages for our answering machines, and then when voicemail started, I was one of those guys that if I didn't get it right the first time, I had to do like 40 takes. I was just absolutely screwed if I didn't do it right the first time. And I'll tell you what, Krystin, I used to just abhor the sound of my own voice. I would trail off the end of sentences like this. As an East Coaster by birth, we talk very quickly. We mince our words together. It's really unnerving to anybody but someone where we come from. And I knew my voice needed work. When you get excited, it's kind of like you get real high pitched like this. And I tell guys all the time how unattractive that is to kind of talk like Barney Fife on a rant, Mm-hmm. And man, I'll tell you what, after 13 years of podcasting with all this practice, I've finally come to peace with the sound of my own voice. And Indeed, I've had women tell me that I have a very nice voice. And I think we as guys would echo the sentiment that you just shared. We love women with mellifluous voices also. It's a well-known fact. It's not by any means conjecture that we're all attracted to a foreign accent that we really like. And certain accents from certain locales tend to be more attractive to a larger cross-section of people than others, for better or worse. A lot of that is based on, what's conjured up culturally when we hear that voice. But I'll tell you what, male or female, whoever you're attracted to, if they've got this wonderful voice that really reflects that masculinity or femininity that you're hoping will emanate from that voice. And for us as men, our part, we love women with a very friendly, warm, happy voice. Women tend to love men with very secure, masculine, confidence-inspiring voices, with a little bit of energy behind it, of course. Nobody likes someone who's, monotonous like Bueller, right? So with that in mind, knowing that this is pretty much a universal human phenomenon of being attracted to voice, what are some first steps you can get guys to, first of all, figure out where they stand right now and then what to do about it to have a sexier, more attractive voice to women?
Oh, yes. Great question. And this is how I always preface it. And the Romans, they understood this concept that you breathe your thoughts. So whatever you're thinking about, you're going to be speaking on that energy. So a lot of guys, right before you have a date or before you're going to call somebody, there might be thoughts of, oh, shoot, I hope she really likes me, or I hope that I'm what she's looking for. And that's all the sounds and thoughts of doubt. And so when you go and speak to that actual woman, you're going to have undertones and exude the energy of doubt. And she's going to pick up on that energy because your energy introduces you before your voice does. So with this concept that the Romans understood, you think your thoughts or you breathe your thoughts and you speak on them, it's super important to understand, what does attractive mean? What qualities are women looking for? Is it integrity? Is it honesty? Is it respect? And then you have to really kind of think about it. What do those sound like? So if you're in the context of the Romans, you'd think about being honest or having that integrity or respecting the woman. And as you begin to think about that respect, you will naturally speak on that energy. And so the woman will just feel that. It's pretty impressive to see how simple this is, and yet how many people miss this with their voice. It's so important.
Well, I think you made an excellent point when you expressed the part about how your energy, your fears, your nervousness, whatever you're bringing to the conversation is going to absolutely be exposed by how you're talking. As we've talked about a lot around here, women tend to follow a man's lead because they're sexually turned on when a guy takes the initiative and makes that first move. So she's going to mirror what she's hearing and seeing from you. So if you're scared and nervous, she'll be scared and nervous talking to you, and that's not a safe, comfortable feeling to a woman, and women are creatures of safety and security. And if we're not establishing that safety and comfort in them, they're not going to be attracted. So it's almost like a double whammy. You've got this voice that's not so confident, that feels like you're a little scared of her. That's inherently unattractive. And then she's feeling a little nervous and scared herself, which is not the feeling she would love to have talking to a man she'd like to be attracted to. And the next thing you know, you've struck out. Very important, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Extremely important. Go ahead and continue. You were on a roll.
Awesome. Okay, so step one would be to really recognize the energy that you are thinking before you speak. So get clear on what an attractive voice is to you. So that step is just awareness. And then step two for you would be to I speak a lot about what lights individuals up, so think about yourself and what lights you up. What is attractive to you about women, and what do you think that they would be attracted to in you? And find those core values. When I speak with my clients, I say, find those 3 top core values and imagine what they sound like, and then begin to practice creating them in your voice to speak on that. So those steps, I would say, are just pure gold to begin to really speak yourself rich.
Now there's your tagline, speak yourself rich.
Yes.
There's wealth involved here too. Or are you just talking about richness of human interaction? Figuratively or literally or both?
Yeah, if I was to speak as rich being an acronym, it's remembering I create happiness. And truly,
That's awesome.
Know.
You make that up yourself?
Yeah.
Remember,
I love it.
I create happiness. You create the happiness and the crispy bills follow, don't they?
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Whatever happiness looks like to you. Absolutely.
I didn't mean to stop you. Continue.
Okay. What was I going to continue in?
Oh, these guys just like hearing the sound of your voice, frankly. So you can talk about just about anything. But one of the things you did talk about that I thought was really interesting was this whole idea of figuring out how it is you really want to sound. And I would offer a way for guys to kind of have a cheat sheet there, and that would be to watch movies and watch TV shows, because Hollywood knows how to cast actors and actresses, and Hollywood knows how to direct those actors and actresses to get across the character they want to portray. So start noticing male characters in TV and movies who are not doing well with women, who are kind of seen as kind of dorky or kind of oafish. And how are they talking? What is the quality of their voice? How do they sound? And you'll start seeing patterns in how those folks sound. They trip over their words. They're high pitched. They talk too fast. They sound a little frazzled, maybe. We've all heard those kind of characters. And then you talk about the characters who men want to emulate, the heroes in the action adventure movies, and the guys who always get the girl at the end. How do those guys talk? What is it in their voice that they're communicating that makes them so damn sexy and attractive? And sometimes, you can even see people when they're out of character, just being themselves on talk shows or whatever. And the men who women actually swoon after in real life are still pretty much that kind of persona where they have a very good voice. It's under control. They exude confidence. David D'Angelo used to talk about speaking from your diaphragm down here and having that resonance in your voice that would almost rattle a glass sitting on the table next to you. I think that's good, but it's not something that if we're not naturally able to do that we should try to fake, because then you'll just sound ridiculous. But definitely what we're talking about, if guys go back this far, is back on the TV show that featured Steve Urkel, who was a famously dorky guy. There was one episode where he turned into a cool guy, and the audience just gasped and burst into applause when he hit the stage as the cool guy, because he was just so dramatically different. And the actor who played that character in real life was more like the cool guy than he was Steve Urkel. And I think that's a dramatic example of one actor being able to have the flexibility and the wherewithal to be able to not only know the difference between those two kinds of voices, but to very effectively portray either one, right?
Yes, exactly.
Another example is Michael Keaton in Multiplicity. He's a pretty normal, masculine man's man at the beginning of the movie, but then he starts cloning himself. And if you've ever seen that movie, part of the premise of the movie is that every time he clones himself, he gets a little less sharp and he becomes a little more stupid and dorky. And by the time the fifth version of himself is made, he's talking completely differently and, dare I say, completely unattractively. So, this is a very well-established principle in Hollywood. And I think guys would do well to study that, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. You're subliminally sending these messages. Like, if you're pitched your voice too high, like you've said, it doesn't have those resonance that are deep. So it doesn't create or send the message of the safety. Those deeper resonance create safety, and that sends that type of message. So there's all these different forms of vibrations and different places where you can resonate your voice from that sends different messages.
Yeah. Has Joe Pesci ever been sexually attractive in any of his movies? Ever? Remember Goodfellas?
Yes.
It's just not, you're laughing because it's just a silly thought. Don Knotts was never sexy in anything. Buddy Hackett was never sexy as anything. Meanwhile, Sean Connery or Gregory Peck, have these guys ever been a dork or unattractive to women in any shape or form in any of their movies? And it's funny to even think about because, of course, they haven't. Well, I tell you what, Krystin, these guys are no fools. I'm sure we can all watch TV and tell that one character is not going to get women and another character is going to do extraordinarily well getting women. How do we incorporate the voice characteristics that we want into our voice while still being authentically who we are? I mean, there's probably a guy or two out there thinking, man, my voice, there's no hope for me. What do I do? And I'll preface whatever answer you give by saying, hey, if you would have heard me 15 years ago, you would be left slack-jawed. So I'm going to go ahead and let you answer that question, but I want these guys to know, first of all, if I can do it, they can do it. But fire away.
Yes. And you said it exactly how it needed to be said, like 15 years ago. What did you do in between then and now? Your voice is an instrument. Like, you've got to learn how to practice it and not practice it incorrectly, because what we've been doing is we're a people of mimicry and habit. And so we listen to sounds that are around us. So if you want to look to the people who are around you, see if, hey, do they maybe have an attractive voice? That might be a good way to decide, okay, I need to see and hear some different sounds, learn how to practice my instrument. And it's a skill that you learn. You play your voice, you learn all the different sounds that you can make. And I have to tell you, like, a lot of people who I work with, I make them very uncomfortable because they've never made these sounds before. They didn't even know that their voice could make these kind of sounds. And so what I consider, unlock your full voice, you've unlocked your full life, but you don't know what you don't know.
Give me some examples of these voices you're making people utter that they never even knew they could utter. I mean, you're making them do like Mongolian throat singing or what?
There's, have you ever seen the haka where?
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen it in person. Yeah.
Yes. It's so powerful. That voice right there that they're accessing is what I call the fire voice or the fire tone. And so I'll give them certain exercises, like put your back up against the wall and pretend that you're pushing a 10-pound or pretend that you're pushing a 10-ton truck.
And that's a tongue twister. Pretend that you're pushing a 10-pound truck. It's a lot of tens and tens.
A 10-ton truck.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So you let out the sounds that you would pretend that you would let out if you were truly pushing that truck. And they're going to be these low grunts and things that you don't want anybody else to hear. But when you're making these sounds, you're giving permission to access that resonance. And then you kind of tweak it. What I tend to go for is find your proprietary blend. What qualities do you want infused in your attractive voice? And we go through each of the voices. There's 5 main tones of voices that I like to go through, and we create your proprietary blend. So one of them is the fire voice, and that's very powerful. It causes people to take action and to move.
You like that guy, don't you? The fire voice guy.
Yeah, it's powerful. I love it.
Your energy changed. I'm thinking so much about voice because of the conversation we're having. I couldn't help but notice how your voice lifted and your energy changed talking about the fire voice guy. And I'm thinking to myself, we all need a little fire voice in our life, don't we? I love it. My wife treated me during our travels one time to an All Blacks game, which is the New Zealand national rugby team. And they famously do the haka before the game. And it was so cool. Oh, man. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of got a little shiver in my spine when you had that as an example, because that dance, that whole ritual is designed to intimidate the enemy, with your tongue hanging out and your eyes getting all big. It's kind of sort of a New Zealand old school way of scaring off bears. If you ever encounter a bear in the wild, you're supposed to kind of move your arms slowly up so that you appear bigger and then back off, Well, these guys are making themselves look bigger and scarier and then advancing. And it's so perfect when you're going to have a rugby game. It's just so cool. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, also as you're talking, you mentioned how you want to find your own for a couple of voice people, we suck. I'm telling you. You also mentioned your own proprietary blend. And for the benefit of the guys listening, Krystin and I are driving each other batty here, laughing our asses off because we're both tripping over our voices so badly and having to edit out so many things where we just screwed up our words. You guys will never hear it, but I wanted to kind of lift the veil and let you guys behind the scenes. If we just start laughing, it's because we just screwed up something. Because when you're thinking and talking about voicing, when you're thinking and talking about voices so damn much, it's like you think about it too much and you start screwing up. It's like, don't think of a pink polka-dotted elephant, right?
Exactly.
But anyway, you mentioned this proprietary blend. And I thought, well, coffee or motor oil or whatever. But isn't it interesting how some of the most famous and respected people, when you hear their voice, you immediately know it's them. They don't have a generic voice. They may not even have a generic voice quality. Ronald Reagan, Barack Obama, just U.S. presidents, even to some degree Donald Trump, although I don't think I'd put him up as a paragon of how to talk and how to have a very eloquent voice, as I wouldn't put up George Bush either. But, even Bill Clinton, what he sounds like when he talks. And, countless famous people. All they have to do is talk into a microphone and you know exactly who that is. James Earl Jones is a famous example, right? Charlton Heston was a wonderful, famous example. Just yesterday, my wife and I were talking about the old Bud Light commercials that Charlton Heston used to voice. Because I asked my wife, what are you thinking for dinner? And she goes, let's do taco salads. And the first thing I thought about was, here's to you, Mr. Taco Salad Inventor. It's got 8,000 calories, but hey, it's on your diet because it's a salad. It's just, it's a unique voice. There will never be another voice like it. I mean, there are so many times when an actor or actress passes and you know that voice has been silenced. You'll never hear it again. And not only necessarily the singing voice, which you're welcome to comment on also, by the way, if you have any thoughts on singing voices. But, when someone who had a very distinctive voice passes, you can't help but get that haunting feeling that voice will never be heard again. So I think that's an incredible bit of advice, to find what's unique about your voice and celebrating it and not trying to necessarily change it, while at the same time developing those qualities that we all want, that we all kind of see as a baseline to having a wonderful dynamic voice. And I'll go ahead and prime the pump for this next question a little bit. I have always talked about and tried to model in my own life this whole idea of having a deeper voice for men, to slow down, to enunciate, to celebrate the pregnant pause a little bit more, which I don't do on this show because it's an audio show and I don't want to leave people in the dust. But when guys speak with a very slow, deliberate voice, and they've incorporated those qualities, having an even tone to your voice, not having it drop off at the end. Another thing men do when they clearly demonstrate that they don't get a lot of approval and that they have a bit of a self-esteem problem is they expect not to be heard. So they'll start their sentence 4 or 5 times thinking they need to butt their way into a conversation, literally, like, but here's another way to do it. Whenever I hear a guy do that, I immediately get the message this guy's insecure or this guy isn't used to being heard. A wonderful example of exactly what I'm talking about, for better or worse, was on our last episode, number 139, with David Shade. David Shade, the sex expert who was on our last show, has a very unique voice, probably more than any other expert known to the men's dating, seduction, relationship, sex advice world. You know that guy's voice when you hear it. But he has those qualities of enunciation and slowing down and deep voice and pregnant pauses that really give him a lot of credibility and make him come off as a masculine man, even though he has that quirky voice. And it's fascinating. What would you add to the baselines, Krystin, of what men are looking for when they're establishing the kind of voice they want? What did I leave out?
That is one of the biggest things, I think, is the confidence. And you hit on that beautifully, because you lead with the confidence in your voice, and people are just attracted to you because they feel something that you have that they don't have. Because if you're being really honest, there is a lot of people in this world who lack confidence, and your voice showcases it so well as your posture. That's what I call body language. It goes hand in hand with your voice, but it's super attractive to other people. So I would just really reiterate the confidence aspect of that.
How would you describe what confidence sounds like?
I like to think there's opposition in all things, and confidence is on the positive side. The opposite of confidence is your self-doubt. So in order to really tune into confidence, I don't focus on the confidence. I begin to get a relationship with your self-doubt and manage that relationship. It's kind of like what I talked about earlier on with you breathe your thoughts. So if you can manage your own self-doubt and get in a good relationship with that, you're not really making it right or wrong. You're just taking charge over that self-doubt, that inner critic voice. You're going to already be huge steps ahead of those in the confidence area if they're just saying, okay, I want more confidence. That's not the place to focus. You focus on your self-doubt.
Have you ever watched Pulp Fiction before?
I think so. It sounds really familiar.
It's pretty much the John Travolta, Samuel L. Jackson iconic movie that made everybody wear black suits with black ties back in the mid-90s. You're probably a little young to have seen it in the theaters.
Right.
But you know the movie I'm talking about, right?
I've heard of it. I don't know that I've seen it.
See, I didn't want to assume anything because, I'm a guy and this is a guy's movie, pretty much. Pulp Fiction is an iconic movie for men, so every guy is going to know the scene I'm about to talk about. There's one of many iconic scenes in that movie where John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson bust into this apartment where 3 or 4, I forget how many of them it was, young adult kids live. And they're working for the hitman and they did him wrong. So now they're coming back to repay they're coming to solve the problem. And the dichotomy between how Samuel L. Jackson carries himself with such incredible, intimidating, powerful, penetrative confidence, and how the one kid who's sitting in the chair fearing for his life is responding to him is so profound that Quentin Tarantino and his twisted genius makes comedy out of it. The kid can barely spit words out because he's fearing for his life, and he seems like this middle-class Caucasian kid just sitting there in a t-shirt trying to eat breakfast. And of course, Samuel L. Jackson looks like a trained killer personified. And the young kid is like reaching for words and completely flustered. And Samuel L. Jackson asks him a question and he goes, "What?" And then he does it several more times, and Samuel Jackson puts a gun to his head and says, "Say what one more time," right? And the kid, the funny part is so well directed and so well acted. The kid mouths the W with his lips, and he's just trying to restrain himself from saying what. And, as I've gotten older, I realized that kids in their teens and early 20s, and it seems like they're deaf. Now that I've had a teenager in the house or two, you ask them a question and the first thing that comes out of their mouth is what? And it's really irritating. So, that's also part of what makes that scene so funny. But that juxtaposition of extreme confidence as personified in the voice and the exact opposite as also portrayed in the other character's voice is just a shining example of what you're talking about. And of course, the kid with the gun to his head is under duress. And there are other examples like this in movies. But, again, just another great way for guys who are listening to really do a case study and look at the movies and see who is attractive and who's not. And a couple other things came to mind while you were talking. First of all, the voice of confidence is the voice of success. It's the voice of inspiring confidence in others. It's what leadership and success and power sound like. You've never really heard someone who was successful, a leader, and in power who didn't sound dominant and confident. If you remember Steve Jobs doing his Apple product rollouts, he always cultivated that voice, and it was something he worked on. He knew the quality of that, and he knew the importance of it. His rollouts weren't always successful, of course, if you've ever seen the movie and or lived it in real life. But it's just fascinating that guys who are in the know tend to create more power, more success, and more respect for themselves. And the other thing that came to mind, and you're welcome to comment on that, by the way, but the other thing that came to mind, and this was just innocently, it just popped in my mind, but I can't help but relate it to these guys, and I want to hear your thoughts on this too. But a lot of guys complain that women ghost them, or they don't call them back, or after the first date, they can't get them on the phone. I've had women in my life who I decided to pick up the phone and call, and who I wanted to be around more just because I loved listening to their voice. My wife is like that. I could listen to my wife's adorable, feminine, confident, sexy voice for the rest of my life, and I probably will, you know. But guys, if you want women to answer the phone, if you want them to talk to you, if you want them to go on another date with you, make yourself pleasant to listen to, because that's part of the sensory experience. So am I on to something with all of that?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. In fact, I have a girlfriend who was telling me a story. She's in the dating world, and she had somebody who contacted her. They had only ever communicated via texting. And the texting, the content they were talking about, it was really fulfilling for her. She was really excited to meet this guy, met up with him, and went on a date. And he said maybe 5 words to her. And she was just kind of blown away, like, what just happened? Like, this is not the same person who I was texting. The date ended, and immediately he began to text her again, said, that was awesome. And she's like, what the heck? And so women, we're creatures of connection. We need that connection through the voice. And I understand, you know, the voice is a very intimate part of who you are. And we're just getting into a culture of not being confident with our own voice. It's one of our greatest assets that we have. So yeah, it was really interesting to hear what happened to her.
Yeah, you can make or break attraction with the sound of your voice, and that is not gender specific. I've had women, same story. I've gone out on dates with them, and I was just done hearing the sound of their voice after about 5 minutes.
Yep.
Didn't need any more of that. Other women I've gone out with just had wonderful, sexy, feminine voices who I just want to listen to. And I think that is part of where star quality comes from. If you look at the A-list celebrities, if they have an irritating voice, it's part of their comedic persona every single time. You know, it's on purpose. People who make it big generally have nice voices to listen to. My wife just loves to listen to Matthew McConaughey.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's got it figured out. And women just love guys like that. This is an incredibly, incredibly important conversation, Krystin, and I'm glad you were here to talk about it today. I think we covered a lot. I want to give these guys a chance to go to your website and learn a little bit more about what you can offer them. When they go to www.mountaintoppodcast.com/speak, SPEAK, what do you have for them there?
You know, I have a little something that they can, I guess, choose into. I've got 3 tips there to a more attractive voice. And it's a huge topic, and it's so important to understand how to use your voice and to sound more attractive, because that's what we want. We want more success. We want to have more happiness, more joy, however that looks. And that's what I have offered there is you'll be able to snag that 3 tips to a more attractive voice.
Excellent. And you know, they'll also be subscribed to your newsletter. And I'll tell you what, gentlemen, you have not received anything in your inbox like a Speak Yourself Rich newsletter. This isn't going to be another tired, generic form of the other rehash stuff you've ever seen before. Krystin is a professional. By now, you know what she's talking about. And when you get information from her, it's going to be information you can get nowhere else. And I appreciate you coming on here, Krystin. You're a delight, and I really appreciate not only you, but the work you do. I think it's incredibly necessary. So thank you again.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you again for having me. It has been a pleasure.
It is. It's our pleasure also. And gentlemen, if you've not been yet to www.mountaintoppodcast.com, one thing I'm not going to do is teach you how to have an incredibly sexy voice, at least not often, and not nearly as well as Krystin would. But I am going to teach you about just about every other thing you can think of to become more attractive to members of the other gender. That would be women for most of you who are listening. And, you'll get on my newsletter there, and I will send you fluff-free advice on how to be the man in demand with the popular women in the world who you want to attract. And you can also talk to me for free for 25 minutes by clicking the little red button in the upper right. And I hope you guys will all do that. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scot McKay from X&Y Communications. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.